he was immensely popular.
A Texas native who rose to own Mississippi's largest television station and ultimately to govern its largest city.
It is over.
Often trying to emulate his hero, a famed Tennessee sheriff who cleaned up crime with a big stick and an attitude.
We need to get the self-serving deadhead cannot get a job manipulating government leeches out of the way.
A benevolent father figure who took in society's forgotten sons and paid for their education.
Faith in God, faith in family, quality education, and volunteerism.
A polarizing figure who offered promise and hope through his own unique style.
This is an issue of values, and there are a lot of things that we can do to teach values that really don't cost money.
Frank Melton was all these things and then some, for good and sometimes not.
Tonight, WLBT looks back at the extraordinary life of Frank Melton. Good evening. He came to Jackson in 1984 to run WLBT, and his impact here was apparent from day one.
Tonight, with stories from the WLBT archives and reflections from those with whom he worked, we remember Frank Melton.
I worked for Frank for 17 years. Some would say when you work for Frank that long, you survive it.
Bradstreet worked under Melton in Texas and Mississippi.
We both moved to Jackson about the same time, and Frank made some very bold, courageous decisions about the future of the station, and it seemed like the whole state was boycotted at the time, and I was 26, 27 years old, and just scared to death because of everything that was going on. And I can remember the day that the headlines hit, and it seemed that all the media was reporting on the changes that were happening at WLBT. I picked Frank up at the airport, and I don't know what kind of look I had on my face, but I do know I was scared to death, and Frank just started laughing at me. It was classic Frank Melton. In the heat of the battle, he's the guy that you could count on to bring humor, but more importantly, he was the kind of guy that you could count on for leadership. You know, when the shells start exploding around you, Frank's the kind of guy that you want on your team. And more importantly, he's the kind of guy you want leading your team.
Melton also hired Dan Modisette during his early days at WLBT.
Frank hires me and tells me that I'm going to run the television station, and that he's going to go back to Tyler in about 6 months. And then 6 months I'd be named general manager. And then 6 months turned to 6 years before I was actually given the title of general manager. And then, of course, Frank never went home. He was here for 25 years, but that was not his original intent when I first talked to him.
Something in Jackson compelled Frank Melton to stay, and it wasn't necessarily television.
I think his first involvement in the community was when we had a gang problem, and he made some real headway and some real progress there, and that kind of fueled his passion to see what else he could do and make a big difference and be a catalyst for change in Jackson.
He was very involved in getting the gangs at that time in the middle 80s to stop killing each other, and he got the gang leaders and took them over to Texas and tried to inspire them to find other ways.
Boy, if you only knew how much I care. So now you're going to be dealing with me, you understand that?
For years, he spent weeks busing troubled teens and gang members to a summer camp he ran in Texas, where he put all his efforts into turning around the lives of kids headed towards trouble. His intervention into the lives of gang members in the Jackson area sidetracked a potential gang war in the late 80s. Melton also served as chairman of the Metro Crime Commission. There he's best noted for putting the faces of known drug dealers up on billboards throughout the Jackson metro area, going after drug dealers in a way some never thought possible. The Jackson inner city youth have been the focus of Frank's life in recent years. His summer camp at the Ferris Street YMCA has become a safe haven for kids trying to escape the troubled areas of Jackson.
I can remember every summer, from Memorial Day to Labor Day, you couldn't find Frank unless it was at the Ferris Street YMCA. That was really what he was. I mean, he was really a social worker caught up in an executive's role, and what he really wanted to do was work with kids, and the TV station was just a platform for that.
The thing that's so fascinating about it, Mike, is that these bigger kids are here every morning before I get to the Y. They're already standing outside waiting on me every morning. And what that tells me is that they need some type of structured environment. And not a single one of those kids have been in trouble this summer. As a matter of fact, several of them are honor students.
Frank been helping you a lot?
Yep.
How?
Let us go swim and teach us how to play and teach us how to be good.
When I teach those kids how to swim when they're 6 years old, they listen to me when they're 16. We've lost some along the way. You know, everybody knows about the situation over on Wood Street. And, you know, as a law enforcement officer, I had to do what I had to do. But as a human being, I felt like a failure when I had to put those boys in jail, because I kept wondering, what could I have done different when they were younger that would have kept them away from a life of crime?
The president and chief executive officer of TV3 Incorporated says it's time for businesses to put their money where their mouth is. Thursday night, community and business leaders, volunteers, and civil rights legends join the civic communications family for a very special announcement.
For the last 13 years, we have invested over $5 million in our communities and different organizations and scholarships and programs that we've sponsored. We want to continue to do that, but we want to do it in a format that will be here when all of us are gone. This is something that Dr. Henry and I have wanted to do for a long time, and this is going to be a multi-million-dollar foundation right here in Jackson, and it's being funded by Dr. Henry and myself and the managers here in the company.
He was a very inspiring guy. He was a huge demand as a speaker across the state. He just loved children and trying to instill in them the values of good stewardship and volunteer work and doing well in school and getting a job and dressing well and being respectful. And he pushed that to the nth degree, and there's no telling how many youngsters whose lives were changed because of what Frank represented to them.
Whatever I want to be.
Melton says it's important to work with kids when they are young.
The first thing that you do is teach them the true definition of success, and success has nothing to do with material things. Success has nothing to do with money. So I think you begin at a very young age and you begin to teach them the proper values.
He also charges something must be done to motivate the parents.
In America today, the black male is an endangered species, primarily because of the fact that only 1 out of 5 is surviving today. We're losing 2 every day to drugs. We're losing 1 to a violent death. We're losing 1 to a lifetime in prison, and only 1 is surviving.
I just think and wonder how many hundreds and maybe thousands of children's lives he's affected in a positive way.
Jeff Buford and his family worked with Melton in Texas and helped orchestrate his move to Jackson.
He was just one of the most passionate men that I've ever known about whatever he did, whether it was in politics, whether it was trying to clean up crime in Jackson or run the TV station in the right way. He did everything with passion.
Well, here we go.
That passion was evident every Tuesday night when Melton delivered his fiery bottom line commentaries.
And now Frank Melton with the bottom line.
I have a multiple agenda for this evening, so let's get started. The Hinds County Board of Supervisors has lied to the public about the Youth Detention Center. On the issue of law enforcement, the politicians need to stand down and let the police do their jobs. Some teenagers are having babies and dumping them on their grandparents while they go and play. My advice to the grandparents: give the kids back to their teenage parents, kick your heels up, and enjoy the rest of your life. You have earned it. From the description given by the Jackson Police Department, it appears that Jackson's most wanted, Elizabeth Slater, is a buffet buster. At 5'2", 282 pounds, somebody is feeding her. When caught, everyone who has hidden her out should be facing felony criminal charges. After having met with the College Board last week, I want to apologize for referring to them as idiots. They are not idiots, they are super idiots. First, their inability to do the right thing has cost the state of Mississippi millions of dollars in the Ayers case. Next, the African Americans on the board, who should be more helpful in the selection process, sit in the meetings like a bump on the log. In other words, they've been put in their place, if you know what I mean. Children need structure, and we do not provide it. Children need leadership, and we do not provide it. Children need sincere love, and we do not provide it. I refuse to accept the fact that we need alternative schools, And I refuse to accept the fact that we need security guards in our public schools. After all, what are we running, a public school or a public prison? The circus is coming to town tomorrow. A ticket will be required, and it will be held under a big tent. I have mentioned this because I do not want everybody showing up at City Hall for the regular weekly circus at the City Council. A ticket is not required for that circus. The taxpayers foot that bill. I was asked a very interesting question last week by the Clarion Ledger, and I'd like to spend a little time answering that this evening. The question was, what is my dream for Jackson? Well, in short, I want Jackson to be the best. I want our leaders to lead. I would like for our citizens to stop putting up with poor, misguided, racially motivated government that gets us nowhere. I would like to see us demand performance and accountability from our children. I will be the first to admit that I am frustrated with the lost opportunities and the game playing in local government. But I know very well how to separate the issues. For example, last week I was fired up at the Jackson Police Department over a single issue. Well, that is over, and I have been and will continue to be a strong supporter of law enforcement, and that includes the Jackson Police Department. After 30 years, Byron D. LeBeckwith was brought to justice and convicted in the assassination of Medgar Evers. After 30 years, Sam Byers was brought to justice and convicted in the murder of Vernon Damer. Now, after 28 years, Humphreys County is seeking a trial in the murder of Rainey Poole. All of this plays an important part in bringing to a closure the dark secrets of the state's past. Now, having said that, let's move from that time in our history to now. 30 years later, today, murder is still a major problem in this state and in the capital city. The victims are just as dead, families are just as destroyed, and the murderers are just as dangerous. So we reach back 30 years to make things right. Now, what do we do about the problem today? If the convictions of these 30-year-old cases is about what is right, then it would appear to me that our officials from the governor on down would place as much emphasis on today's homicides as they have in these other cases. Not to do so, in my opinion, would send the message that homicide in today's world is acceptable behavior, and that is the wrong message. Finally tonight, friends, the murders of Mr. Evers, Mr. Damer, Mr. Poole, the 3 civil rights workers, and probably many more, were horrible crimes committed by misguided cowards. Today is a different story with different leaders who are in a position to do something about the violent loss of life in this city. This is why I feel so strongly that our mayor and our city council can make a difference. We have the right idea in Jackson. We just may have some of the wrong people. On the issue of school safety and behavior, return the authority to the classroom teacher, and we need to support the teachers instead of suing them. In some cases, teachers spend more time with our children than we do. We should support and respect that. On education in general, we should demand performance and accountability from every student without exception or excuse. If we demand performance, that is exactly what we will get. The 1999 Dumb and Dumber Award goes to the 2 Hinds County constables who allowed a prisoner to escape while in their custody. In my opinion, one constable used just bad judgment, and the other one was born an idiot and has been losing ground ever since. Their incompetence has cost the city and the county thousands of dollars in their efforts to recapture the prisoner. We can build all of the parkways from Jackson State to the International Airport. We can completely renovate the King Edward Hotel, and we can pick up all of the trash on the city's streets, and we can lift every voice and sing. But Jackson, Mississippi will never reach its full potential until we do something about drugs and about crime. The people most affected by crime in Jackson are African Americans. The people who are responsible for doing something about it are mostly African Americans. The people who live in rundown, drug-infested neighborhoods are mostly African Americans. The people who are responsible for doing something about it are mostly African Americans. The people in Jackson who need financial capital to start businesses are mostly African Americans. The people who can make this happen are mostly African Americans. The kids that we're losing every day here in the capital city are mostly African Americans. The people who are responsible for doing something about it are mostly African Americans. Well, how does city leadership, which is mostly African American, respond to all of this? Well, they're rebuilding Congress Street in downtown Jackson and debating about the King Edward Hotel and costing the city millions of dollars in opportunities because of their ineptitude. Finally tonight, friends, we need to rebuild the inner city, restore neighborhood values, and get rid of the repeat criminals and lead this city forward. The problem, nobody, and I mean nobody, in the current administration has the guts or the courage to do what is required. A part of the solution, the people who live in gated, secure neighborhoods, and I'm one of them, need to get their heads out of the sand and demand that this city move aggressively in the right direction. Not to do so means that your neighborhood, your business, and your children may be next. A few years ago, I met a 12-year-old here in the city of Jackson. This kid was raising 5 younger brothers and sisters. He was dirt poor, no utilities, no furniture, and very little food. After meeting the kid, I drove around the corner and beat the steering wheel of my car and cried like a baby. That young man is now in his 2nd year at Duke University. After a month and a half of peace here in the city of Jackson, the homicidal maniacs are back on the loose. We've had 4 homicides in the last few days here in the capital city. Any homicide is unacceptable, but this is totally unacceptable and should not be tolerated. Instead of calling press conferences to talk about street repairs and other political mess, why does the mayor not take a strong and uncompromising position on homicides here in the capital city, since all of them have been black on black? I am not blaming the mayor for these criminal acts, but I am deeply concerned that his silence may suggest that the behavior is common and acceptable here in Jackson. Since no one in this administration will take any action, I'm going to meet with the district attorney to ensure that the crime of murder in Jackson will be punishable by life in prison without parole. Black-on-black murder is not a misdemeanor. It is a serious issue and must be punished to the full extent of the law. Finally tonight, friends, I do not want to hear any more about flags or about street paving, police foundations, or re-election. I want to know what we're going to do about black-on-black crime here in the capital city. The ultimate embarrassment will occur if this administration continues to sit back and say nothing. It takes the mayor of Ridgeland less than a month to hire a new police chief, while here in Jackson it has taken over a year. Well, the mayor says that's because Jackson is a much bigger city. Now, at first, he blamed the delay on the incidents of 9/11. Now he says Jackson is a bigger city. Well, sir, you are the captain of the ship, and I hate to inform you, but the ship is underwater and the captain's going to drown. Well, we need to learn to speak Spanish. After 100 years of playing racial games in this country, it is clear to me that we are not going to get it together. We have injected race into every major issue in this city and this country. While we have been playing the race card, Hispanics have been gaining control of the economy and the political process. So, buenas noches, and that, my friends, is the bottom line.
Melton's commentaries made him a celebrity, and after more than a decade of holding public officials' feet to the fire, Melton became one himself, first as head of the Mississippi Bureau of Narcotics, then as mayor of Jackson. But his unconventional style did not always result in effective public policy.
It's going to shock many of you, but it is time to bring this stuff to a conclusion.
Melton brushed aside newspaper criticism of his roadblocks near the state capitol building on the first day of the 2003 legislative session.
We can't win this war if we're worried about what people think or what people are going to write or what people are going to say. I don't care what they have to say. We're going to do what's right, without regards to politics, without regards to race, and without regard to any outside influences. We're going to run the drug dealers out of here. We're going to tear the drug houses down where they're selling crack cocaine and all of these burnout structures. We're going to take them out of here too. And, you know, all that's been going on is people making excuses, and now it's time to get it done.
One of the very first things Frank asked me to do when I came back was to do some research on an individual that he was very interested in. It just happened to be the sheriff, the former sheriff of McNairy County, Tennessee, Buford Pusser. who subsequently was played in the movie Walking Tall. And he carried a gun, but in the movie, the guy who played him, Jodan Baker, carried a big stick. Frank was very impressed with Buford Pusser's style, and we know what the end result of what happened a couple of years ago in Ridgeway, when we found out that the drug house, the alleged drug house, was taken down, and of course Frank was seen with a big stick.
That attack on the house in Ridgeway Street eventually landed Melton in state court, where he was acquitted, and then federal court, where he was awaiting a second trial after the first ended in a hung jury. He often said, "You can't be punished for doing the right thing."
Frank certainly meant well. His heart was in the right place. His methods were a little unorthodox and often extreme.
But his heart was beginning to give out. He had bypass surgery in Texas, followed by a series of complications when he returned.
I'm back. Started back at work this morning about 7 o'clock. I'm feeling fine. I'm going to have to slow down for a little while. I think you all understand that. But I'm back at work, and I feel real good. Been taking some long walks, and I've been doing a little swimming, so I'm feeling fine. And I wanted you to know that. And I really appreciate your help and your encouragement and your support from those of you that I've had a chance to talk to.
One of the things that I really worried about was if Frank wasn't reelected, what was he going to do, with the rest of his life? He'd lost his health. He had lost a great deal of, if not all of his fortune that he made. He still had all these legal complications that were out there, and were probably going to continue for years and years. And I did worry a lot about his post-life after being mayor of Jackson. And it's just sad that it ended the way that it did.
I talked to Frank last week. He called me, and we had a small chat, of course, and he told me he was just so very tired of everything. I got not the idea that he was clearly talking about his legal problems, his health problems, having to run for re-election. He was so very tired, and he just gave me the impression he wished it was all over.
I want to remember the good things about Frank. I want to remember his generosity. I want to remember his passion to help people. Unfortunately, the last few years, there's just been so many physical problems and so many other things. He, just didn't take care of himself. And I think the stress of the office and the politics of it, that's unfortunately the last impression, but it won't be my only impression of Frank.
I always admired the confidence that he had in himself and the decisions that he made, and I guess more importantly, the courage to stand by convictions. He taught those of us who had the opportunity to work for him, he taught us those things firsthand.
At the end of the day, I think that's what we're here for, is what difference we can make in other people's lives, and I think Frank made a tremendous amount of difference in a lot of lives.
He was the real thing. Some people have tried to caricature him, in the media, but he was the real deal. He believed it. Man, he did it. He really believed that he was making a difference and could make a difference.
He was a completely unorthodox anomaly, but he certainly made a big difference in this state and in this community and the lives of so many people.
Faith in God, faith in family, quality education, and volunteerism. When I leave here this morning, I'm going to the Ferry Street YMCA, and I'm going to teach a reading class this morning to a group of preschool kids. That's my volunteer work for today. Before I do one thing that benefits me or my family, I'm going to do something to help other people. That's what it's all about. Well, finally tonight, friends, and to the parents in this community, we may create 1,000 programs, spend millions of dollars, and allocate many resources, but nothing, and I repeat nothing, will ever replace the family unit. In my opinion, the definition of the family unit is a mother and a father. Guys, at some point, it takes a man to teach a boy how to be a man. And that, my friends, is the bottom line. And that, my friends, is a bottom line.